Hi there. Today we're looking at how to sew this beautiful bridesmaid corset with asymmetric basque waistline, illusion yoke, mermaid tailed skirt and draping detailing. If this is something you'd love to learn, do stick and stay and let's do it together.
We mark ½ inch. This is the space in between the cleavage. Then we mark the base of our bra cup, that is our underbust. We square this off. Then we trace all around the bra cup. We scoop this in, and that will be the space to which we are fixing our bra cup. We mark 3 inches as our waist and then 8 inches as our hip. We square these lines off. Then we mark our waist divided by 4. We add our seam allowance of 2 inches. This is how we measure the bust divided by 4. It runs over the bra cup, then we add our 2 inches to it. On the hip line, we divide our hip by 4. We add our 2 inches allowance to it as well. Then we connect them. Right. And so from here, we move upwards by 3 inches. That's just about 1 inch short. Then we mark all the way to the seam allowance. Then we connect through to the top of the bra cup as we had marked on the brown paper. So this is what we have. This part is not going to be used. We're adding ½ inch to the scooped cup so that when we stitch, we don't fall short with the measurement. We go ahead and cut this out. Right, we place this on another paper. Then we trace the waistline, the underbust line, and the hip line. Right. After this, when we place the front on, we realize the space that we have here. That is the 3 inches we went up by. Then we mark. Right. And so this is the nipple interval taken to the back, and then we add 1/4 inch to it. So we have 3 3/4. Then we join these 2 points. On the waistline, we move away by 3/4 inch on both sides. Then we join. And so the total back dart will be 1½ inch. So this is a waist divided by 4, the 1½ inch dart, and then 2 inches seam allowance. On the top, we have the bust divided by 4 plus our 2 inch seam allowance. On the hip, we have the hip divided by 4 plus our 2 inch allowance. Then we connect them. We divide this by 2, taking off our seam allowance. We divide it by 2, and then we mark. We do same on the top line. Then we draw a line cutting through these 2 to touch the hip line. We move away by ½ inch on the waistline. Then we join all the way to the hip. Now I want to take the seam allowance off, and so I'm marking this. This part won't be used anymore. I shouldn't have added it in the first place. We're taking the front seam allowance 2 off. Then we go ahead and cut it out. We're marking 6 inches from the waistline downwards because we wouldn't want the dress to extend all the way to the hip line. So this is how we shape the side seam. Right. We bring the same thing to the back, and then we mark. At the back too, we are moving from the waist downwards by 6 inches as we did for the front. and then as it gets to the side, we raise it up a bit, as we did for the front as well. To get it accurately, we first would have to fold the dart from the waist all the way to the hip, so that we get a flat surface to be able to get the shape of the down part. Right, so this is what I was talking about. Then we go ahead and cut it out. We need to shape the back neckline too, and so we are folding the top part of our back dart, and then we just oppose that with a side seam. We are moving down by 1.5, then we connect it to the side seam of the front, and then we'd also go ahead and cut this out. So we are labeling them for easy identification. Then we'll go ahead and cut out the darts. Right, so this is what we have. With the pattern, we did a sample, and then we needed to do some adjustments. Right, and so we're going to adjust the hip side, and also the cleavage. I think the 1/2 inch was too big, and so we cut out. We refine these. Now this is how we added our seam allowance, as you can see, for the 4, 3, and then 2. Yes, the allowance is added on the back and the front. We've cut 4 pieces, 2 for the fashion fabric, 2 for the lining, for both the left and right. When we go to the front, this is what we have. We have the skin net folded into 2, and then also this is paradise, but then I've turned the back and both stretches. And so we're going to join 4 to 3 and 3 to 2. We do so for the lining and also the fashion fabric. When it comes to the lining, we fused it with a violin. With the fashion fabric, we fused it with a woven tricot. We repeat same for all these. I prefer to join the end first, and then we'll come and start from the other side. And this ensures that 2 of the fabrics that are being sewn together don't surpass each other. And so for all of them, you stitch the end first, then you'd come and begin from the other side. And as you can see, this gives us a very good finish. After that, we are top stitching the fashion fabric using flat fail seams. So we open up the seams, sew 2 parallel lines, and these are decorative stitches. Actually, you can decide to bypass the step in case you don't want to use it. When it comes to the lining, we are stitching actually the boning onto our boning channels. That is the joints that we had with a 3, 4, and 2. For each of them, the rule is to leave about 1/2 inch beneath and 1/2 inch on top. That is with reference to the boning and the fabric to which we are stitching it. And so we cut it short. And this is to make sure that when we are finishing the neckline and then the hem part of our dress, we wouldn't stitch onto the boning. This is also another boning we are introducing, and it is sewn at the center back where we're going to do the lacing. And so we leave about 1/2 inch, and then we stitch the first bone. Then we are stitching another bone That is about 1.5 inches away from the first one. After this, we're also introducing another boning onto the side seam. So this is from the top all the way to the bottom. As you see, then we would cross another boning from the top very close to the waistline and also to the hip side of our side seam. This is to make sure that that side is very strong, and that is why it's appropriate to do the sample and ensure that your measurement is accurate. Now we are sandwiching this adhesive web into our skin net. This is to ensure that we get the shade of color that we want for our clients. And this is also a champagne gold paradise fabric, but then I'm using the back part. Now we're stitching the top, this side and that side. After stitching, we cut out, so that is, we trim off the excesses. Now we stitch the scoop very close to the tip. We wouldn't sew that much. This is about 1/8 of an inch. Then we cut it out. After cutting this out, we are going to fish out the seams that we just created. Right, we do that neatly, and then we give it a good press. As we say, the golden rule to sewing is to press as you go. After that, we trim off the excesses, and that gives us a neat finish, as you can see. Right, now we'll mark a line at the center front. Then we do a 3 inches at the top, 1.5 down. We do same for this other side. We mark 1.5 at the top here, 1.5 at the top here, and then 3 inches down. That is a reverse of the first one we did. Then we also mark the lines like this. We are cutting 1¼ inch strips of fabric. So you cut as many as possible. Then we fold it good size together. Then we stitch the top part. Then we reduce the seam bulk, and then we turn it to the good side. Right. Then we place it at the top here, and we stitch all the way to the bottom. We then insert a 1/4 inch ridgeline bone through this very line, pushing it all the way to the top. And now we flip it over and stitch one side of it. As we get to the bottom, we pull it, and then that is to reduce the boning at the base, because we don't want it to get to the tip exactly. And then we stitch the other side, as you see. We cut off the excess, and this is what we have. We repeat same for the other strips that we had also created. We're placing them on as we did for the center front. Bear in mind, this was put on the left side of the line we drew, and so this one would also be put on the opposite direction. You understand? So that your boning channels align right. This is also put on the left side of the line we drew because we had turned it. Right, after this, we insert the bones into our channels and then we stitch. As we get to the tip, we'll push it away, cut it short, and then we'll pull it so that we have about half of an inch beneath the tops that hasn't been, boned. That is, the bone wouldn't get all the way to the bottom, as we said earlier. We repeat same for all the other channels we have. Right, in case you find this video useful, do well to subscribe. You can also share with us your questions, your suggestions, and your well wishes, and it will be very much appreciated. Now we're going to cover our bra cup with the fabric, and so this is what we do. We trace exactly the same thing all around. Then we trim off the excess. Now we stitch this very side. Then we've also cut other pieces of the same using the same method. Right. And so we place this inside of our cup. Then we stitch the center, that is a middle seam. We stitch that, and this is what we have. After this, we flip it to the other side, and then we stitch the base of our cup all the way through. And this is the top that we are stitching. Then we are cutting the sides, the bottom, and then we exclude that of the top of our cup. Then we match this with the other seam, and then we stitch just the top this time, making sure that we add this hem tape so that it gives the edge of our cup a crispy look. We are doing an understitching in this instance. It's appropriate to also reduce the seam bulk. It adds to the beauty of your dress. Alright. So as we flip it over like this, we're also going to stitch the base. Starting from the center, we work ourselves out to the other side, and then we'll repeat same for the other side. We'll go ahead and then also stitch the other one, but in this instance we're adding this lace, and so we would sandwich the lace into the two cup layers that we have, and then we stitch as we did for the first one. We also do some top stitches. Right, we'll repeat the same thing as we had done for the first cup we sewed. So this is what we have. Now we'll go ahead and then run overlock stitches on the edge, then we'll come and insert it into the scoop. Doing this is a bit tedious, and then it requires so much patience, because the least mistake you do, one, that is a cup, would either be longer or shorter than the space to which you are fixing it, and so you need to be extra careful. Right, so that's what we have. We're also going to do the same for the other side. In case you are not very sure if you'll be able to sew it into it perfectly well, I would advise that you stitch the end first, and then you'd come and begin from the start. By so doing, you wouldn't surpass your target. Now we are stitching the side seam together. After stitching the fashion fabric, we would also place the lining beneath. By so doing, we sandwich the front part into the two, back patterns, and then we stitch. Remember, you do not have the luxury of, seam allowances, as I would call it. And so you need to be extra careful with your measurement. Now this is how we stitch it. We've pushed the front part away, and then we're going to stitch the top. I've always said, for crispy finish, it is much appropriate to insert your hem tape. And so we've stitched the top, that is a neckline, and then we're stitching the back, and that is where we're going to fix our eyelets and do the lacing for the closure. We reduce the seam bulk for the corners, and then we're creating notches, after which we would fish the whole thing out. This part is a bit tedious, but then you need to do it carefully and then neatly. After that, we are top stitching the side seam. We do this and give it a good press. Then we cut a fabric into bias or crossway, folded into two, and then we are finishing the base of our dress. Also making sure that the adhesive or the hem tape is placed there. After stitching that first, we do our understitching. This also helps to get a neat fold. That is when we fold the bias tape inward. Once we've done the understitching, it takes everything to the back. Now, so this is how we seal the ends of our tape. We stitch it as you just saw, and then we flip it to the wrong side. Yeah, so this is it. Right. Now we're flipping this over with the help of a hem tape. We iron this, and then it stays. As it stays, it wouldn't stay forever, so it's appropriate to also hem it up so that it becomes a permanent, stay. Neatly finished, as you can see. We continue this through to the other side. Now with the skirt, this is our waistline. From the waist to the hip, this is about 9 inches. Then we do 10 inches from the hip to the knee line. We square these 2 points off. We mark the waist divided by 4 here, the hip divided by 4, and this is the hip divided by 4 minus 2. At the base, I'm marking 20, and then we join from the waist to the hip, from the hip to the knee, and then from the knee all the way to the base. From the knee to the base is 25. We bring the same thing to the side as you see so that we get a curve. And so it's straight from this part, but then as it's going to the side, it goes up. Now we'll go ahead and cut this out. This is the front pattern, and so from here we're going to place this onto another fabric to cut the back. Then we extend the waist by 1 inch, that is for the back dart. Right, then we join it to the hip side. Now this is also our zipper allowance at the back. For the tail, I'm using exactly what I have of my fabric, and so all the allowance is taken to the back. As you can see, no measurement is actually used, and so it depends on what fabric you have, to use as your tail. We'll go ahead and cut this out. This is a true definition of cutting your coat according to your size. When you have enough fabric at the back and then you'd want to do a bigger tail, you can extend the tail as we did ours. You can extend it to get it bigger, to your desire. And so after cutting this, we'll go ahead and then take off our 1 inch dart as we had placed on the back. We'll move downwards by about 5 inches, then half of an inch. We mark this, then we'll go ahead and stitch that. We do so for the left and the right parts of our back pattern. All right, we give it a good press. Now we align the front skirt onto the back, and then we'll go ahead and sew this and that side. After stitching the sides together, it's now time to attach our crinoline or our horsehair to the base of our tail, or to the base of our skirt in general. Yes, I wanted to add the hem tape, but first had to stitch the horsehair, and after that I did that of the hem tape. This was for convenience. You can do all at the same time if you so wish. Alright, so after doing this, we would also do an understitching. I first wanted to try this type of understitching where I sew at the good side, but then I realized it was becoming quite slow to adjust the seam allowance to the crinoline side, so I had to flip it over and then stitch on the wrong side. As you can see, by so doing, you're able to see the seam allowance, flip it, and then stitch it onto the crinoline or the horsehair. Now we give it a good press, and when you press it, it makes it lie very low. Horsehair or crinoline, it's able to accommodate so much heat, and so you can either stitch it this way or you use the hem tape, to fuse it onto the fabric. If you are fusing it with a hem tape, you first place one in between the horsehair and the fabric, and then one hem tape in between the two horsehairs, right, like this. But bear in mind that it wouldn't stay forever, so if you're able to do this and then you get a good finish, you would as well want to use hem needle, to also hem the crinoline in place. Right. Now, our model wears the dress, and then we are marking our asymmetric basque waistline. We pin it to hold the skirt to that of the top. Then we go ahead and cut the waistline. Just as you see me do. After that, we would also mark where the skirt is supposed to be on the base of the top. We apply marking so that when we remove the two, when we separate the two, we'll know where exactly to place it and then, stitch. Now, we are taking the neck hole from the skin net. No measurement actually. Then we place it onto the model. We're trimming off the excess because it stretches very well. We would go ahead and then push that into the top part of our bodice. We pin that as we adjust them. Then when it comes to the back, we'd also cut it short. Then we trim the back neckline, and so we cut all the way to one side of the neckline, and then we repeat same for the other side. Then we continue tucking the skin net into the dress. Then we pin. You can also use a chalk, that is a fabric chalk, to mark where the skin net is supposed to be attaching itself to the top of our dress. We continue to add our pins to it. Now it's time to shape that of the armhole. There are dresses that have the skin net overlapping the shoulders, a bit. If you'd want that, you can also shape it along that line. But with this, we want it sleeveless. And so just the shoulder. We'll cut it like this. And now, as I said earlier, we'd come and match the markings we had marked on the skirt and then the top. We'll do that, and then we'll go ahead and stitch the skirt onto the top part of our dress. At the back, we leave some allowance so that we didn't stitch all the way to where the eyelet is. That we stitch to get to the other side. We also don't stitch to this side of the eyelet. We leave about 4 or 3 inches at the back. Then we also attach the skin net to the dress. It's very appropriate to use the very quality type of skin net so that it does not tear apart. It's very, very important. After this, our model does the fitting again, and then this is the outcome. You may want to leave it like this and then add a few embellishments to it if you so wish. In our case, I'd want to do some draping, and so this is the fabric that we cut. It wasn't really to any specific measurement. We stitch this very side after we flip it over like this, cut off the excess, turn it good side out, you know, it didn't really come with any measurement because I just wanted to, you know, do that drape on top, right? And so I'm inserting my adhesive web into it so that I wouldn't have to stitch, you know, to finish the side. We just give it a good press and then the two parts stick. We also insert one at this very side and then we're good to go. Then we place it onto, you know, model anyhow you'd want to pleat it, but in our instance we just pleated about 3 lines, you know. As you can see, we just tagged it onto her. Yes, and then we cut off the excess on the side seam like this. We give it a good press, you know. Then we're taking it off. When we flip it over, this is what we see. We'll still continue to give it a good press. This is how I'm finishing the base because it wasn't finished initially. Now we have to put this on to the dress, but before that we'll stitch the pleats so that it doesn't open up. After that, we'll mark the parts that's supposed to be attached to the side seam, the top and the bottom. Then we'll turn it over like this and then we'll go ahead and stitch this very side. After stitching that, we'll also mark the base of the drape. That is where the drape is to be attached to the top of our dress, and we'll flip it over like this. We'll go ahead and stitch this in place. And so we stick this through till we get to the point where we cannot stitch further. After this, we'd also use thread and needle to attach the waist detailing, that is the lace patches. You know, we stitch them, you know, in place. And also when it comes to the drape, we would also attach it using thread and needle. You know, we tack them and we are done.